coming up next.
One example that comes to mind is that I had a story for a long time that I'm not worth fighting for. And
Mhm.
I had that story long before I was married to someone who like reinforced it for me. So
Mhm.
it was a childhood story to some degree. Am I worth fighting for? Am I worth fighting for? And then I entered a marriage where, oh, I'm not worth fighting for. And so it was reinforced. And so after that marriage ended, again, that story just felt stronger. Like, see, now it's been proven. It's clearly true. But then God dropped a new story that was Marcy. You are worth fighting for. It's just that some people aren't willing or able to fight for worthy things. And it wasn't me. Like, I'd never had that thought. The only thought I'd had was, I'm not good enough. Right?
Mhm.
But through prayer and listening, I had an opportunity to hear his story, and it immediately unraveled that old one. I've never returned to that old story, and not because I mastered it. He just settled it in my heart.
Welcome to Faith Over Addiction podcast, where the chains of fixing and striving are broken and joy is rediscovered in Christ. You are here because you know there's more for you, a life beyond addiction's chaos, rooted in God's peace and promises. This is the place where Christian women like you learn to release the weight of fixing and striving and instead lean into God's strength to create a home filled with love, grace, and hope. She is clothed with strength and dignity. Proverbs 31:25. That's you. You may not feel like it yet, but you are stronger than you know. And God has so much more for you than carrying someone else's addiction. Here, we'll uncover how to set healthy boundaries with love and a little humor. Find resilience and grace in the messy moments of life. Celebrate small victories and embrace joy like never before. Lean into God's promises for restoration and strength because He's not done with your story or your loved ones. This is your invitation to rise up, embrace your worth in God's kingdom, and take back what's been stolen by addiction: your peace, your joy, your future. Your faith is the foundation, and your boundaries are the bridge, and God's truth is your guide. I'm Tanya Gioia, your host and fellow traveler on this journey through the chaos of addiction. I'm here to cheer you on, equip you with tools that work, and share the truth that's changed my life. The joy of the Lord is your strength. Nehemiah 8:10. Together, we'll uncover how to create safe, loving space for healing, starting with your own heart and home. By setting boundaries, trusting God's plan, and embracing His truth, you can reclaim your joy, your peace, and your family's future. Then you will be able to stand firm for your family and legacy as a kingdom daughter, a woman who can laugh at the days to come, knowing her identity is secure in Christ. So grab a cup of coffee or tea and get comfortable. Let's walk this journey together. We're about to take back what's been stolen, create a safe, healing space for you and your family, and rediscover the joy God has waiting for you. Welcome to Faith Over Addiction. I'm Tanya Gioia, your host. We're here to help women claim their identity in Christ so that they can create safe and loving homes for those who are dealing with addiction. Because what Jesus said to us was, we are to love above all else. But that doesn't mean abandoning yourself, because loving yourself is important too. Love your neighbor as yourself. So I'm here with Marcy Pusey. She is uh, just an incredibly talented person, trauma certified coach, author, TED speaker, working with many people around telling their story, sharing the benefits of overcoming this resiliency, children and adults. So Marcy, tell us a little bit more about your work and what you do.
Yeah, I'll start with the flashy stuff and then I'll get into the behind the curtain stuff a little bit. I'm a certified rehabilitation counselor. I'm certified in trauma and resilience. So I do have a private therapy practice that I have. on the side, sort of. I've written 22 and counting books for children and adults across genre. Most of those have been winning, which is very validating, right? Just to know that your work is being recognized. Yeah, I've been able to give 2 TEDx talks. One of those specifically on the brain and story, and another one on being more than our traumatic events. And so I shamelessly plug those, but I just think there's a great message there that I do want to share. And then as a result of all of my work there, I have fallen into running a business called Mita Mare Ponte Press that I started, where I help people tell their stories and get those stories into the world through publishing them. So I get to bring my clinical therapeutic experience over to helping authors overcome the obstacles that they'll face, both logistically and internally, in order to get their stories out. And then the behind the curtain a little bit is that I am a single mom. I left an abusive marriage, and not easily. I would have stayed there, but I feel God rescued me. So I guess I was pulled from an abusive marriage while we were serving on the mission field. So now I'm a single mama to 2 teenagers. I'm the sole breadwinner running this business that I run.
Wow.
And as a result of some of those trauma things, I was diagnosed with complex PTSD and GAD and a panic disorder. And so I share those things because I think it's important to know that God can use us to accomplish incredible things just for ourselves and in our own healing and growth, but also for his kingdom, regardless of the diagnoses you've been given or the life experiences that you've had. And so my journey is both. It's been navigating a dysregulated nervous system as a result of trauma and abuse while trying to help make healing accessible to the everyday person in the ways that I've learned just by navigating my own journey. So that is a part that's me in a nutshell.
Wow. That's just a wow. And you've got teenagers in your home.
And I
I
have
mean,
teenagers.
that's dysregulating enough,
It
right?
can be, it can be. Though I raised adopted children first. I fostered a number of kids, adopted two. My 2 adopted kids are now 26 and 25. And that was really hard work. And so in worthy work, but just really hard. And so it makes the 2 that I have now just seem easy. It seem
Well,
really
and I throw out, we've talked about dysregulation before. Give us the clinical definition and then give us the street definition of
Yeah.
dysregulation.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we do. We use the language of regulation and dysregulation. So really that's looking at our nervous system and is it operating in the way it was designed to, meaning there's an actual threat to your system in some way, whether it's a physical threat or a threat to your emotional safety, and is your body responding in the appropriate way that's regulated. Dysregulated is really when your system is in a state of hypervigilance and is overreacting to things that are just environmental. So it can be that some of those are legitimate threats, but our body is at that point perceiving everything potentially as a legitimate threat and being hyper responsive. And so that might be when you're just feeling jumpy or yeah, hyper aware of your surroundings, what's going on, feeling extra anxious or nervous, then I would say, yeah, we're in a dysregulated state. So a panic disorder is really labeling that like, oh, your system is always um, choosing to panic over all kinds of known and unknown factors. And so you're dysregulated. And yeah, I think
And,
that's probably gave you both.
and my experience has been, and I'm making fun of the teenager because it's more age appropriate, correct me if I'm wrong, for them to be dysregulated because they're having these things happen at them. And I've sometimes fed off of their dysregulation
Oh, we
and
can.
been dysregulated myself. So when you get
Mhm.
with somebody who's dysregulated, I have found it not completely uncommon to go, okay, I'm beginning to dysregulate with them, to get in the boat with them rather than maintain my adult status and say, okay, I'm the adult here. So
Yeah. And you know what? Sometimes adults have to say that to themselves. I know even in my own therapy work, there have been times where my therapist has said, is this little Marcy like showing up or is this adult Marcy? And so even internally, we're navigating some childhood things that flare up really, like that little girl or little boy in us. But yeah, our nervous systems do communicate with each other. And so somebody who's got a more regulated nervous system can actually bring regulation to dysregulated people around them. And to your point, vice versa. Someone who's hyper dysregulated, who's got someone who's just a little more fragile, maybe regulated, but fragile, we're hanging on, can disrupt that. And so it's really incredible how our bodies are communicating with each other beneath our awareness.
beneath our words, and I've told this story before that. So I have two sons and a husband, and when I come through the door, it used to be, it's not always this way. I come through the door, I'm thinking, okay, I need to get all of this done before we sit down to dinner because then I can rest afterwards. So you can imagine who comes through the door. I'm going here, here, there, 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 there. They don't like to be there when I come home, right?
Uh,
I've really had to think about, I don't need to go into Sergeant Marshall mode the minute I walk through the door, because what I really want is to connect with them.
yeah.
But I am sabotaging it by saying, okay, if I get all this done, then I can connect with them. Right. So in
Yeah.
the addiction world, it's kind of like, okay, if you're not drinking and you're okay and we've got all this cleaned up, then I can connect with you. When really the opposite of addiction is that connection piece.
Yeah.
It's connect first, even in the mess.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about trauma and trauma story and retelling yourself the story, just given my example, what story should I be telling myself when I walk through the door when what I really want is connection? What could I be saying to myself?
Yeah. Well, I think you kind of touched on it. Like, I want connection. And what is going to best foster that when I walk through the door? And what is my priority? Is it the tasks get done so that something, or the connection, and where do the tasks fall into that? It might be that your personality wiring rests and relaxes better when those things are cleaned up. So that's going to be part of who you are. You're going to find some level of irritation with that while you're trying to connect. But coming to a place of, okay, but how can I serve connection first? And where do those things fall into that? And so it could be just a conversation with your family, and not, I'm a little over answering here, but it could be a conversation with, hey, when I come home, all I really want to do is connect with you. And that's a struggle for me when there's whatever, clutter, dishes, shoes out. And I know that you want a mom who walks in the door who's not telling you what to do. So what if we do this? Right? Some of those things are addressed before I get there. And I also find a place to do some of those things maybe later to get whatever it might be. So I think just coming back to which one is serving your end goal and being aware of what that is. Is it the task or is it connection? And that will help you then determine what getting there looks like.
How have you worked with clients to have them both maintain healthy boundaries and say, this is what I need to come back into myself to be regulated? So who, like, let me ask that question better. Whose responsibility is regulation when you're living with someone who's dealing with addiction?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's always our own responsibility to manage our own regulation. I think it's a gift that we can offer to support other people with our regulation, or they can support us with theirs, but that really does still require, to some degree, two healthy people who have that understanding, right? There was an episode recently on The Survivor that's making its rounds right now, where there's a young woman with autism. She only told one other member just so that somebody there knew that when she begins to spiral, she needs someone to hold her hands very tightly and tell her it's going to be okay. And there's a moment in a recent episode where she began to spiral. And now that one and only person was on a different team. And the show allows him to go over and support her in the way that she had asked. And so he was able to bring his regulation to her dysregulation. She had pre-coached him on what that looked like. So he holds her hands, he gives her the hugs, he's saying the words, and she finds regulation again. but that wasn't trying to pull it from someone who wasn't able to give it. Does that make sense? So
It
that's where
does.
I think it was her responsibility to ask for that support from somebody who was healthy and able to give it. Then it was his decision to choose to decide whether he was capable of that and willing to do it. He did. And then in the moment, it was just, it's become actually one of the most powerful moments on Survivor. And for the first time ever, they're released, like replaying the episode because it got so much attention from that moment. But I think even the attention it got shows how much we long for that in others, that we could have that safe person that we know is healthy. But to come back to your question, it is our responsibility. And she owned that for herself. He owned that for him. And so, regardless of who we're living with, we've got to find that because to a degree, it's the thing we can control. I can't control the people around me. I can't make someone relapse or not relapse. Or today, one of my clients was dealing with raising an adopted child who's got traumatic, like not a TBI, but brain injury related to early trauma. And so there's behaviors that mom cannot control. So, how does she live in this chaotic environment and not lose her mind, right? And so the work we do is learning how to internally manage that and be responsible for our own. And sometimes that does mean walking out of a space that's going to cause us some kind of mental harm, right? It might be removing ourselves from the chaos until we're feeling strong enough to go back, whatever that might look like. So again, long answer to it's our own responsibility to manage that.
How do you see God entering into this? How do you see our faith piece entering into this regulation or dysregulation?
Yeah, I think that's the most important question because honestly, as a therapeutic field, we're only just beginning to talk about this in the way that's actually the most effective. I mean, we've been treating traumatic experiences with talk therapy forever, and yet
Mm,
we've had the knowledge back Dan Siegel and early, before we even had PTSD, working with veterans, the body keeps the score. We understood that it takes somatic work to really touch trauma things. It takes working with our bodies, our imaginations, like the whole connection, right? So that being said, we need Jesus. Like he's the all-knowing, he's the counselor. He's not behind on the times or the information. And so when we can lean into our faith and our understanding of who we are as his children, as his creation, who we are from a place of identity, then it doesn't matter as much what the world says or where the therapy field has figured things out. I can go directly to the source of my identity. And that's a journey still, right? Because we have to believe it. The client I was talking to earlier was like, I know it in my head, but I still don't seem to be acting as though I believe that my identity comes primarily from God and not from others. I keep trying to get it from others. And so there
mhm.
is a work involved, but we've got the Holy Spirit in us to give us that peace that transcends understanding, to give us the wisdom and discernment we need if it's time for some medication, medicinal support, or if it's that I need to start doing cold plunges, which is something I
Ooh.
discovered. I know. Or what is it? Like there's a divine wisdom there that we have access to that can really guide us into what's right for us. And so I think from a faith perspective, I'm partnering things of this world, but I'm doing that through the lens of wisdom and discernment and listening, prayer to make sure I'm doing the things that are right for me because it's not a one size fits all healing journey.
I think that client asked a very good question of, okay, I understand it. I can read the scripture. I can cognitively be aware of it. I know I should take all my thoughts captive. I know
Mhm.
that his thoughts are higher than mine and that he has a plan. And oftentimes my plan doesn't work with God's plan. I know this, but translating it into the body, into the trust, into the regulation, how how does that what's the I mean, we can say
Yeah.
we'll seek the kingdom first
What
all
does
we
that mean?
want,
I
but
know.
what does that mean in
Yeah.
action?
Yeah. I think there's a few different things that I do as you ask that. I'm processing it. One thing is I do have a practice of listening prayer. So not just telling God all the things I want him to do or fix or yeah, I guess those are the main things. Here's my petition, but really trying to spend time listening. And sometimes I'll do that with actually like paper and prayer and writing down what I hear. And sometimes it's just as I'm driving, I'm like, God, I need a new story. This story keeps looping in my mind and I want it to stop. And so I need you to give me a new story. What's the true story? And then I want to listen for it. And it comes. I feel like it comes. But I know that like listening to the voice of God raises a whole other theological conversation. But for me, it's usually something plops into my head that is not from me, that I
Mm.
know wasn't in my realm of thinking. One example that comes to mind is that I had a story for a long time that I'm not worth fighting for. And
Mm.
I had that story long before I was married to someone who like reinforced it for me. So
Mm-hmm.
it was a childhood story to some degree. Am I worth fighting for? Am I worth fighting for? And then I entered a marriage where, oh, I'm not worth fighting for. And so it was reinforced. And so after that marriage ended, again, that story just felt stronger. Like, see, now it's been proven. It's clearly true. But then God dropped a new story that was Marcy. You are worth fighting for. It's just that some people aren't willing or able to fight for worthy things. And it wasn't me. Like I'd never had that thought. The only thought I'd had was, I'm not good enough. Right?
Mm.
But through prayer and listening, I had an opportunity to hear his story, and it immediately unraveled that old one. I've never returned to that old story, and not because I mastered it. He just settled it in my heart. But I had to be willing to hear it and ask for it and look for it, right? And so now I'll find that if I'm like looping a thought that's not helpful, one day it was these people are stressing me out. These people are stressed. I kept finding myself looping back to these people are stressing me out. And I was like, that story doesn't make me feel better. It's not making me better. It's really just making me more stressed. And so again, I sat and prayed, like, I want a new story. God, what is the truth of this situation? And instead, what came to me was something along the lines of, this is an invitation to practice the faith you claim. This is an invitation to practice the faith you claim.
Yes.
I was like, ooh, I like opportunities. Invitations make me feel like something's not being done to me, that I'm being invited to participate. And it changed how I was interacting with these highly stressful people.
Right.
Of that.
Right.
So listening is a big piece of it. And then I might have forgotten all my other thoughts then when I said I have a few about what I do. That's probably the biggest one. Maybe just the therapeutic work of paying attention to my own energy. And I don't mean like woo-woo energy. I mean that if I'm operating from a place of anxiety, if
Mm.
I feel like an anxious energy, because I came from an anxious attachment, that anxious energy like makes me want to be hasty and prompts me to do things in a reactive kind of way. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
someone hasn't texted me and I'm like, oh, what did I do wrong? Are they mad? That anxious energy might cause me to reach out and be like, what did I do wrong? Are you mad? Right? And so what I'll do instead when I recognize that that is my compulsion or the thing like motivating my behavior, I'll pull it back and say, I'm not acting, then I'm not doing anything. I'm not doing
Mm.
anything external. Nothing
Mm-hmm.
external is going to happen because this is a me issue. And the regulation, I want to bring that back to a place of security. And so at that point, I'm going back to God in some form. I'm putting on worship music. I'm going for a walk and listening to a good sermon or inspirational talk. I'm in the word, whatever it might be. I'm choosing to not respond when I notice that anxious energy until I feel secure within myself again, which is always going to be quickest if I can connect that anchor back to who I am in God. And then not only am I causing less problems in my life because I'm not reacting to that energy, but I'm learning what it feels like to operate from security. And it becomes a new practice and easier to find when when I'm when I need it. Right.
Learning what it feels like to operate from security when that hasn't been the mode.
Mhm.
You've moved us into story, which is awesome. How do we even begin to determine what stories we're telling ourselves?
Yeah. There's a wonderful quote by Flannery O'Connor, who is an author, that I will paraphrase. I don't want to, I don't know if it's word for word, but something to the effect of, I write so that when I read what I've written, I know what I'm thinking. That resonates with me so deeply. And I think there's a scientific reason for that, though I always hold space for someone to say, I don't relate to that at all. We're all unique. But there's something about just putting words down, unprompted, uncensored, unscripted, that can reveal to us what's going on. And when I say I think there's a scientific reason for that, uh, our brainstem is a place where we hold a lot of injury that hasn't been resolved. That's what we call trauma. It's really unprocessed trauma or unprocessed experiences that just haven't found their place in the right file in the brain. So they're just in a holding pattern. They're stuck there in our brainstem, which doesn't have access to language in the same way that I'm talking to you right now. I'm
Mhm.
communicating to you from the higher level thinking, the prefrontal cortex, the parts of my brain that can decode language and do all of that. The brainstem is where we hear through a lot more play and somatic things. So our brainstem will communicate that things are hard through back tension or hip tension or neck and shoulder tension or ribs popping out of place, right?
Mm.
Our sleep being disrupted, our twitchy eye, um, our shallow breathing. I'm giving a lot of body signals, dreams, imagination, like it's communicating to us in a sensory way and not so directly as we do in talk therapy, which is why I said that's not the most effective. And so when we sit to write, even though we're using words, because we're not planning them and trying to decode them, we're just placing them, that becomes a somatic activity. And that is where we get to listen very uniquely to ourselves in a way that we don't normally get to. So to your question, like how do we even know what the story is? How do we begin to listen? We I think one way is just to start writing and see what comes out. I'll do a 5-minute practice in workshops with people where I'll surprise them and set a timer and be like, okay, 5 minutes, write. Don't overthink it. Don't worry about if
Yeah,
Aunt
anything.
Sue sees what you've written. You get to just put everything down. And you can start with, I hate this activity. Marcy's making me do it, and I have no idea what to say. So I guess since I'm here writing, you'll find something to say, even if you have to start with, I don't want to, and I don't know what to write. And people are shocked at what will come out of them in 5 minutes when they're given the opportunity and the time and the space and the permission to write freely in that time. So I want to say this is just one way to tap into that part of the brain. It's my favorite way. It's the way that I do a lot of work with people. But any somatic activity, it can be music, physical,
Mhm.
yoga or free dance or all kinds of things. Being out in nature can tap into that sensory part of our brain. But I think one of the quickest ways to finding our stories is by listening to ourselves. And we can do that really well with just starting with a free write.
And I think about that. I don't have the discipline to do it. I think about that when I am like what you described earlier and what I've seen clients do. They're in a tailspin, they're in a tizzy, they're in an anxious place.
Mhm.
Doing nothing doesn't feel good.
Right.
Doing something can get them into trouble with the people that they love.
Uh-huh.
And they
Mm-hmm.
have no grounding in between there because somewhere they're not aware of this, the mom who's saying to herself, if I had just not put him in nursery school, if I had
Mm-hmm.
just stayed home the whole time, or if I had gone to work and I had supported them better, all the stories are different, but we're not conscious
Mm-hmm.
of that story.
Mm-hmm.
And the feeling, this is where I see a lot of people that I work with of, I can fix this, I can solve this, and I'm going to step in and take action. What do you
Mm-hmm.
find when people step in and take action without understanding their story?
Well, there ends up being a lot of sabotage, self-sabotage, other sabotage, meaning that you might have a goal, but you're completely consistently disrupting your own goal and getting in your own way of achieving it. Right. So, for example, if I believe I'm not worth fighting for, I'm going to walk around like somebody who's not worth fighting for, and I'm going to give off that vibe, and people are going to not uh, notice me, right? And then they're going to reinforce the message, not just that I'm not worth fighting for, I'm not worth anything. And then I'm going to be looking for that, right? We talk about the reticular activating system, which is where your brain will find an idea. And if we give enough attention to it, it'll start to pointed out to you in your environment. Not because it is more present than it's ever been, but because it's now focused on finding that in your environment, right? So we have all these things working against us, all based on where we're directing our attention. And so if somebody isn't willing to slow down and really challenge that thought, is it true that if I had put them in a different nursery or not put them in nursery at all, or whatever, that we would not be having this experience? Like, so sometimes I have to pull back and really challenge that thought that is coming across as true. That's hard work. That's metacognition. It's one of the hardest things to do, recognize our own thoughts. And yet, like you said early on, we're called to take our thoughts captive and make them obedient to Christ. So we're called to bring awareness to the stories that we're telling ourselves and to take them captive, to test them before the Lord around whether they're true or not true. Somebody who's not doing that, who's just living by default, is going to reinforce their false beliefs unintentionally, right? Just by acting out that story. And so when we again slow down and bring awareness to it and begin to challenge those things, we're going to find life changes as a result, even though we're the ones changing. The environment around us might be the same, but we're going to interact with it differently.
What it brings up for me is the person who says, okay, I want to change my story. I want to change my story. I want to change my story, and forces it. Now, you talked earlier about I'm in a listening prayer. I'm listening for how God wants to change my story rather than I'm just going to muscle up and I'm going to move through this and change my story. What have you found with people who just muscle up and push through?
Yeah, I think some people can. And to some degree, that's cognitive behavioral therapy, right? I'm going to challenge my thoughts and my beliefs, give myself better ones, and then as a result, my behavior is going to change. I think there is a therapeutic practice there that people could take where they might see change. And but even that comes with awareness and redirecting attention. So if somebody's not even using that like as a therapeutic model and they're just like, I'm just going to be different, they're constantly failing, right, in their view, and falling short. And now we're adding guilt and shame and adding worthlessness and what's wrong with me. And I mean, we find this in addiction too with relapses, right? There's so much like, oh man, I was doing so good, now I'm not. Now I'm all these things as a result of this relapse. And there's two stories there, right? Either like, oh, I'm a failure, or oh man, I'm getting back up. I'm going to do it again. This is part of the journey. What did I learn from that relapse? Right? Different stories that we can tell about the same thing, or episodes. I have a number of clients who have schizophrenia and will celebrate. I have one right now putting out a book, beautiful book. Um, and in her story is like how many years have passed since she's had a psychiatric hospital stay. The so I gave her her final edits. We have a cover, we're ready to publish. She has an episode. She's in the hospital for like 2 or 3 months, right? She has an opportunity now to take a story and say, well, I can't write the book because now I'm not
Now
recovered. Now
I
I have
failed at what I told you I can do, right?
which
I've
happens
failed
all
at
the
that.
time.
Yeah.
Or, wow, I'm still on a journey. And I bet it will be really encouraging to my reader to know that even after years, you celebrate every day that you have not been in a hospital. And maybe that hospital visit comes again, but guess what? You've got the support and help you need, and you're going to get right back out to life outside of the hospital. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
various stories that we can tell. Okay. So to your question, someone who forces it, especially without any kind of therapeutic work, they're just going to pile on shame and guilt and reinforce probably an already negative, unhelpful, untrue story. Someone who's willing to do the work and man, inviting the Holy Spirit, it just makes it so much easier because in cognitive behavioral therapy, I'm having to come up with my own new story. The examples I gave you, God gave me. I don't know that I would have come to those stories on my own.
Right,
I'm worth
right.
fighting for. Like I would have to dig so deep into I don't even know how far I'd have to have dug to find a message that says I'm worth fighting for. Some people just aren't capable or willing to do it. I don't know. So that added presence of God that can speak truth to us beyond what we could even think or imagine is so profound. Okay, I know I was all over the place. Basically, if you try to muscle through it, you're likely to struggle.
So if you don't want to, we often repeat what we have seen and what we have seen as acceptable, and head down that shame spiral. In fact, I've been doing some work on the shame spiral could be as addicting as anything else.
Uh-huh. It can
So,
become a comfort blanket.
yeah, talk through why the shame spiral becomes a comfort blanket, why we go to it when we know, Paul says it, I do what I don't want to do, but I go there anyway.
Yeah. I think of it like this. I think of it like a jungle, like our brain is a jungle. And we've had a machete and we have like cut down a path. And then we've walked over that path over and over and over. It's beaten down, it's clear, it's now a trail, right? And we might walk that trail and we might discover, I use this in one of my books, that there are monkeys on that trail who just fling poop at you every time you walk down it. So you're covered in monkey feces, but the trail is there and it's the one you know. It's way less well, it's very predictable.
Right.
I at least know that there's monkeys in it. But if I go down this other path that doesn't really exist yet, it's still pretty overgrown. There might not be monkeys, but I just don't know. I don't know what's down that path. So I'm just going to keep taking the one I know, even if it like hurts me or stinks me up or is uncomfortable or whatever it might be. Right. There's a part of our brain that likes autopilot, that likes predictability, that likes familiarity. And so the more that we continue to choose that path of shame, the harder it is to take that machete and cut down a new trail that's
Mm,
unknown, unfamiliar, foreign, I don't know. And even if there's a promise of gold on the other end, right? I still don't know what's between me and that gold, but I know this keeps people in abusive relationships. This keeps people in their own just toxic thinking, internal thinking, worthlessness thinking. It's not that we want it, it's just familiar, right? Why do some people marry their parents? Someone like their parents. Well, it's
right.
familiar, even if it was so dysfunctional. And why do we keep going back to the same type of man or woman? Because it's familiar, right? And so there is that part of our brain that likes the familiarity and the predictability. And that is again where we have to it's work to say, I'm going to choose that other path. And the nice thing is, and our brain is designed for this, is that as soon as we start with that machete, right? And I use machete because it's hard. We don't have a lawnmower. We're actually we're cutting down the jungle. That the more you walk down that new path, the more it becomes the familiar path. And pretty soon that other one is overgrown. And this is actually too how the neural pathways in our brain work. The more that we direct blood flow and oxygen, a direction, the more that it's going to continue to take that path. But when we start to pull it away and go a different direction, our brain will create new neural pathways, just like the jungle trail that I'm talking about. And so that is one of the reasons we can get caught in that loop. And then it's reinforced so often in our culture, right? There's different messages that we've also had to carry throughout life that seem to reinforce these things. And so um, I think this is where the power of healthy community becomes a really important topic too, because we need people in our life who are healthy and whole and safe and can tell us the truth in love. I find this in my faith community the most often, though not always. There's definitely church hurt. You've got to be wise even with people who call themselves believers and walk into a church building, but finding those healthy people who can be sounding boards with you, with the Holy Spirit, to say, like, hey, I'm going to hold your hand as we go this different direction. I'm going to be there for you while it's hard. I'm going to give you a new story. I'm going to be another voice in your life that's reinforcing the new story, whatever that may be. So much of our injury is relational. And the way to relational injury is relational healing. And it doesn't have to be the same person who injured us, but having someone bear witness to our journey and our story is so powerful. And so, again, I answered both. How to, why do we loop and stay in that place? And like, what is it like to get out of there and forge a new path?
So for the listener who is like, okay, I want to do a new path. I really feel like I'm in a loop. What's one tiny little step that they could do today? Maybe they've got a grasp on what God is sharing with them. Maybe they don't.
Mhm.
What is a tiny little step they could do today?
I would encourage them to listen to one Listen to their thoughts, like find one thought or one story, just catch it, right? It's almost like they're fluttering by and you're just going to go catch one and look at it. And that might mean you write it down, it might mean you record it, whatever you want to do, but look at it and look at it with curiosity and not judgment, not shame. And then ask if it's true, right? So this might be that you find yourself feeling irritated. Well, wow, why do I feel irritated or off or like just noticing? For some people, it could be noticing a feeling first that can
Mm-hmm.
mark that there's a thought that's aggravating me. It might be noticing your response before, during, or after an interaction with somebody. Um, but just trying to catch one of those, just catch it. One quick example for me is one day I was making eggs for breakfast, which I love eggs. And I was torn between whether I wanted to make two or three. And this time, now how many times have I made eggs? So many times. Those thoughts have just fluttered by while I'm making eggs. So many, but this time I caught one. And the thought was, well, if I have three eggs, I can't justify why I'm fat and ugly, because people who eat three eggs, I guess, specifically me, are fat and ugly. But if you have only two eggs, then you don't have an excuse for being fat and ugly. Like it's just your genetics. Like, what? I'm just trying to cook eggs. I didn't know, but I caught this thought. I was like, what is that weird feeling that I have about whether I have three or two? What is that? So I caught it. And then I saw this message and it almost made me laugh out loud because I just thought I was trying to decide between two or three eggs. I didn't know that at the bottom of that thought was like, I'm worthless if I have three, and I have a little worth if I only have two. It was absurd. And then once I started saying that out loud, so this is where community comes in. Once I
Right.
started sharing that, it lost its power because people were like, Marcy, I have five eggs every day. I'd never think about it, you know? Or someone would be like, well, what if you had two eggs and a donut? I'm like, it's fine as long as I don't have the third egg, right?
Yeah.
Somewhere, my psyche had picked up this crazy story that I had been operating from so that every time I had eggs, there was some shame attached. Well, if I had three. If I had two,
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'm hungry, but I don't, now I'm got a little worth. And so then once I realized that it lost its power. I could laugh at it and say that's actually ridiculous. There's no truth to that. But I didn't know. I was just making eggs and feeling shame every time. So something like that, recognizing, is there just something in yourself that you notice that you can grab and pull down and look at and say, what is that? And where does that, like, where, what is it? Just bring your curiosity and see if you learn something about it. That would be the one thing I would encourage people to try to do today.
Awesome. And that could be done, just thinking about it, it could be done on paper. But
Yeah.
like you said, there can often come some laughter with this because you look at it
Yes.
and go, if my child said this to me, I wouldn't laugh at my child, but I would see the absurdity in it
Yes.
of, okay, how did we connect this to a shame piece, which is much, much deeper than, although having three eggs these days at $16 a carton is
That's a whole different
kind
issue
of
now.
like, whoo, how much are we going to pay for these eggs? But that type of thing, it just disconnects. Marcy, you have so much work, 22 books, two TED Talks for this community that's listening, this addiction, family addiction area. Where would you point them in your work?
Yes. Well, I'd love to offer a free guide. I did not mention earlier like I planned, but it's called to How to Turn Your Mess into a Message. And so for anyone who's interested in just even beginning to listen to yourself, like what is that mess? And is there a message in it? It might just be for you. It might be a message for you. It could be for others. But there's so much power in us sharing our stories because we realize we're not alone, and sometimes that our stories have been absurd and need a little adjustment, a little tune up.
Absolutely.
So I have a guide there that people can use, and I think I've sent you the link to that. And then otherwise, I'm on Instagram at Marcy Marie, and I'm on TikTok at Marcy Pusey. I'm kind of all over. If you search my name, I'll come up. I'm Google searchable, and Amazon as well. All of the different books I've written will come up there also.
All right. Marcy, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure. Now, I want to warn the listening audience, there are some clinical terms in here that may not be completely clear. Grab them and Google them. They're out there. We talked about regulation and dysregulation. You also talked about CBT, and there's DBT, and there's a lot of processes in there. but also get a hold of Marcy. You're still taking clients, I
Yes,
would
yeah,
assume.
yes, I am. Mm-hmm.
So where can they find you if they are interested in working with you? How would they find you?
Yeah, so you can go to marcypusey.com and you'll see a tab there for counseling. You can also search me on Psychology Today. I'm listed there as well. And I'm able to work through my specific certification and licensure with anyone, anywhere, which is great. I'm not restricted to a state. And then I do telehealth as well.
Okay.
So yeah.
That's becoming more and more possible, and I'm so excited about that because you may be in a small town. You may
Yeah.
be somewhere where this could be complicated if you did this out where people could see you walking through a door.
Mhm.
So don't let that hold you back. The regulations are moving forward with you don't have to be in the same state. You don't have
Yep.
to have I don't even know how to explain it, but there was a licensure at a time where you had to be in the same state. But it sounds like Marcy, you've overcome that and
I have
that
through
work.
the path that I chose. The Californian LMFTs and LCSWs are still restricted to California, which is where I am, but I don't have that restriction. So
Awesome. All right, Marcy, thank you so much.
yes, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for tuning into the Faith Over Addiction podcast. Remember, nothing changes until something changes. Today is your day to step out in faith and make a difference. You are a daughter of the King, a woman who can spark incredible ripple effects of hope and healing, not just in your own life, but in your family, your community, and God's kingdom. If this episode encouraged you, bless someone else by sharing it. Send it to a friend who needs a little hope or post it on Instagram and tag me. I'd love to hear what resonated most with you. And hey, if you're ready to reclaim your God-given identity and create a safe, loving space for yourself and those you care about, let's talk. Book a quick call with me today, and I'd love to hear your story and help you take the next step. Oh, and don't forget to head over to Apple Podcasts, search for Faith Over Addiction, and leave me a review. Your feedback not only makes my day, but helps other women find this podcast and step into freedom too. You are strong, you are loved, and the joy of the Lord is your strength. Nehemiah 8:10. Until next time, keep walking boldly into the life God has for you.